We are in Champions League, man.
That was my next
Dilly din, dilly dong, come on.
Encara Messi, 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 gol, 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 gol.
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it.
I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
This is the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast with Gary Curneen.
Hello, welcome to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. My name is Gary Curneen. Joining me for this episode is Ben Garner. He holds a UEFA Pro license where he was mentored by Jose Mourinho. We will definitely talk about that. Premier League assistant coach with West Brom and first team coach at Crystal Palace. He also worked at the academy there and coached in the Indian Super League with ATK. Was really looking forward to this chat. Life on a Premier League bench as an assistant coach. So much theory and information available to coaches both on social media and coach education these days. But how is all that information implemented on a daily basis when the pressure is on? Outstanding insight from Ben here, and you're going to love this one. At Gary Curneen on Instagram, let me know what you think. At Gary Curneen on Twitter. Quick announcement before we start. The Modern Soccer Coach webinar for November is coming up on Wednesday, November 20th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We are talking about set pieces, the first ever webinar I've done on set pieces. We'll cover attacking versus defensive, youth, college, amateur, pro level insight from coaches, zonal marking, can it actually work, how do you train it, what separates the top teams, and then we'll use some video analysis to give you some ideas as well. 45-minute webinar. We'll have a discussion after it, all the coaches. It's free for all members of the Modern Soccer Coach community. Only $6 a month to access all the content, webinars, etc. modernsoccercoach.com/community. If you want to buy a year's pass and get a free book, modernsoccercoach.com/shop. And the special deal is in there. Okay, life in the Premier League as an assistant coach. Here is Ben. Enjoy. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. Really excited to have you on.
Pleasure, Gary. Pleasure.
We'll go right into it. Your journey is pretty amazing. An interview 30, 45 minutes an hour won't do it justice. So I'm going to go 2 feet, crunch and tackle in to start with. Looking at what you said and doing a little bit of research, I was intrigued because when I was growing up, it was at the time of Spurs and the Euro 96. Terry Venables was a big name, and you said as a young coach you were inspired by Terry Venables, and
yeah, I
wanted to ask you what specifically was it about him that stood out when you watched him work?
I think at that stage he was very different to anything that I'd seen or experienced as a young player, and I think up to that point I'd been frustrated in terms of it was all about size. It was all about strength. I didn't think me personally, and also players across the board, young players in this country, were being developed well enough technically and tactically. And Terry was completely different to that, very different to what I'd seen before and what I'd experienced as a player. So he was so positive. He encouraged creativity. He had a range of man management. It wasn't just the stick all the time. You know, he had the arm around the shoulder and would speak to players in different ways and have a laugh and a joke with them. And I just think you could just see that he made players feel good. And I was a young kid training with the first team one pre-season. He didn't know me from Adam. And, he made me feel good and made me feel positive. And when I injured my ankle not long afterwards, I wanted his coach and I started taking my badges, and he was definitely a big motivation in that.
That documentary they did, Euro 96, when they went back, he's in a hotel now in Spain or wherever it is, and I was just astounded by the different. So obviously the Gascoigne, how he managed Gascoigne, which is probably an art in itself as a manager, but then how he manages then the Shearer, the guy that's out of the striker that's out of luck. And sometimes we think that dealing with these players, you're getting them all at their peak, but they're all at different stages. So is that more of a personality of him, or is that empathy or like emotional awareness? Or where's that come from?
Yeah, I think it's emotional intelligence and awareness without doubt. I think every manager that I've worked for, every experienced assistant and people that I speak with, managers I've gone to visit, it's always the number one thing is man management or people management. Making sure that you treat people well as a person first before the football side even comes into play. And I think the best managers have got that, whether it's a natural thing, whether they've had to work at it. But Terry, without doubt, had that natural charisma and that natural way of dealing with players. I spoke to him on the phone probably about a year ago now and was picking his brains on Barcelona and that side of things and what he did there. And it's just absolutely fascinating to hear how he dealt with different characters, different personalities, different language, different country for, such a huge club. But I think it always reverts back to that people management and being able to manage the group and manage people as individuals.
Your time then in Academy and Palace, so you're probably not aware because you probably don't have the same social media nonsense that I troll through on a daily basis, where it's everything about here in the US is basically there's a academy system that there's a lot of money invested now where we're trying to produce, elite players.
Right.
They're not coming through in the national team and people are getting impatient and people are now questioning these environments. So with your time in Palace, there was a period that Nathaniel Klein, Victor Moses, Wilfred Zaha, John Bostic. I remember Bostic at a young age when I came. Amazing players. What was it about that environment that brought them through?
Probably the biggest thing would be the area. South London is a fantastic area for the recruitment of young players. I think that's continued even now. Look at the amount of players that have come from, a small area in terms of size, densely populated, but a small area. So I think that was the big thing. We had the raw materials to work with. When I started in the academy fairly early on, there was a lot of freedom to coach. There wasn't the structure that there is in academies now. I could coach what I wanted, how I wanted. So I think that gave you creativity and freedom as a coach. And I think we also had that with the players. It wasn't a one-size-fits-all approach with the players because we had, very different players, a lot of wingers and skillful attacking players. So it was challenging them, it was coaching them and developing them without restricting them. They could do amazing things with the ball, especially, the likes of Victor and Wilfred. And if you made them play two-touch all the time, you just weren't going to get that from them. So I think that was important in having that freedom and being able to almost treat each player as they needed to be treated to get the best out of them. Also, the fact that we had a number of good players in the same age groups challenging each other, because you can work as much as you want as a coach and you push players and you develop them and you're doing your best to do that. But the players also challenge each other. And I think because we had a real core of good players across a number of age groups, they pushed each other as well. They wanted to get better. The standard of training was good. It was intense. So without that would have made a big difference. And as we got players sort of going through into the first team, I think that pathway was important as well, because once you see one do it, everyone else in the academy is looking at it going, well, I can do that. There is a pathway at this club. There has been success. And in John's case, John got in the first team at 15 years old and was a terrific talent and made the decision to leave the club at the end of his, before his scholarship to go to Tottenham. And the ones that stayed actually broke into the first team and did terrifically well. So that was probably a big help for us in terms of recruitment and keeping our best players, because the presentation almost took care of itself, because you were showing that these are the players that have stayed. This is what's happened to them. There is a pathway at this football club. You don't need to leave. You can be successful here. And that allowed us to keep our best players. And after that point, we didn't lose anyone for a number of years.
That's really interesting there about that creativity piece. I think that we struggle over here, Ben, in a big way, where we grab and copy. And we copy it because it probably looks good in a PowerPoint or because it looks good in a curriculum book. But in doing that there, you are creating a one size, almost an average player, aren't you? Like, you're not allowing them to express themselves.
Yeah, I think as a coach, sometimes it's difficult. You've got to take your ego out of the way and actually, what do the players need? How do you produce an elite player? And also, you have patience with it. If you put a curriculum in place or a program that you think will produce players, you've got to give it between 5 and 10 years, really, to see the benefits of it. If you're chopping and changing because Spain are suddenly doing this, or they're doing this in Argentina, or Germany are having success, and you're trying to copy all the time, I don't think you really get anywhere. You've got to have your own way of doing it that suits the country, that suits the type of player. And then you do have to allow that flexibility within players. And I've seen it here where there's almost a quest for the perfect player. And you've got a winger that's absolutely unbelievable what he does. And you're trying to work with him on perhaps heading the ball or defensive things that they're not going to shape his career. You're better off focusing on these strengths are amazing. That's what is going to get him in the first team. Yes, we're going to try and work on the other areas, but also he's absolutely brilliant at this. Let's keep making him better at this. Let's keep putting him in situations that challenge him, because that is going to be his unique selling point, if you like.
So when you go to your journey and then you move in from these players at the academy level and then go into the first team and go into professional players, what did you have to change, or what were the personal challenges that you had to deal with?
I mean, initially when I first stepped up, there was probably the pressure straight away in terms of there's always pressure of results, but at that point we were trying to stay in the playoffs, and then obviously had a chance of promotion to the Premier League. So you're going from a development environment into a situation where there is that instant pressure of trying to achieve results. So it becomes I didn't change how I coached and my style, my identity, but I certainly had to become more concise in terms of the coaching, more precise with what I was doing. My focus really was on making sure that the quality of my work was very, very good. I wanted to make sure that everything was very well planned, very well organised, that it challenged players in the right way, that it was helping us, achieve performances and results on the pitch. And also in terms of speaking to players, if I was showing any video clips or a player was asking me questions about the opposition or about his past performance, I wanted to make sure that information was as high a standard as it could be. So, doing your work, watching games back, watching the opposition. If I was going to talk to a player about something, I needed to make sure that it was spot on. So I think you have the challenges in that respect, and the changes. You obviously evolve with each role and that you're given. So, I'm learning all the time in that period, but I didn't go away from who I was, what my strengths were, and how I coached. It was just a case of if you're working with the under 18s, you're taking more time with it because you're trying to get more information across. You're trying to educate them, whereas with the first team players, there wouldn't be as many stoppages. If I was going to make a point, it'd be very quick because they want to keep going. They want that intensity into the session. So the big change was probably putting even more detail into the planning, because you've got a shorter amount of time to do it in. You've maybe got a shorter space of time in terms of making your coaching points. So you've got to become better, but in a shorter period of time.
Did the match schedule and that intensity of Premier League, and then obviously with science the way it is and dictating that you can't do X amount of hours every day, did that ever become a challenge?
It was a challenge probably for me personally, that I missed the amount of contact time that I had, because you're going from having your own team, which I'd always had. I doubled up a couple of years where I had my own team and I was assistant, but that was still quite easy because I had my own team every week. And that was the first time where I was going in and you're an assistant now, and it's not your team. You're not making the final call, and you're not dictating the training program necessarily. You're having an input, but it's the manager's ideas that you're putting across and working towards that. So I think that was a challenge for me in terms of adjusting to that, and finding out how to be most effective in terms of helping the manager and helping the players. Probably another area that was important was looking after the players not in the team. How you speak to them, how you keep them as part of the group, how you keep them motivated, and making sure that training for them is unique. And that was something that I focused a lot of energy on at both Crystal Palace and West Brom, was making sure that those extra bits for those players and the training for them was actually, really detailed and really high level, because they need that to keep them motivated. And also, I always wanted to be conscience-free in terms of, if he gets a chance in the team, is he fit? Is he ready? If he's not, that's a failure on me. You can't have a player that gets an opportunity to go in the first team and doesn't play well because he's not fit enough or he's not ready for the game. So that was something I focused on with the sort of the group that wasn't playing, and even players out on loan. I think that was important to stay in touch with them, go and watch them play, and make sure they knew they were still part of that group.
This is the number one question that I want to ask you. You wrote a great article for Football DNA on improving the decision-making of players. I wanted to get your thoughts on where you think a coach can make the biggest impact at the professional level. When you're talking about less time on the pitch, is it through the planning with session design? Is it with those video analysis? Is there somewhere where you feel that you specialise?
It's probably a combination of everything. Again, it probably depends on the needs of the individual as well. And if you spend that time getting to know them and understanding how they best learn, how they best take information on, then you'll probably deal with each individual differently in that respect. So do they need to be on the grass and going through things to really grasp it and take it on board, or are they effective at looking at video analysis and going through it that way? So again, I think you have that flexibility with the individuals. From a coaching perspective, again, I think on the grass for me personally is the best way to do it. You're actually doing it, you're going through it, and how specific you make that for the player and how realistic it is the key. Because if it's not the right intensity, if it's not the right pictures and challenges they're going to face in the game, then it's not going to be as beneficial as it should be. So as much as possible, making it small groups, units, even individual work, and really specifying those decisions, those pictures they're going to face. So, you might have a number 6 in midfield who's sitting in there, and say you're playing with 2 advanced midfielders in front of him. What pressures is he going to face? What sort of levels of awareness is he going to have to make the right decisions? How did the opposition press him for that particular game, for an example? And recreating those pictures and going through that with him. And then also using the video analysis, and, you can show, it might be a player for the opposition that he really presses quick. So when that ball's coming into you, that's quite often a trigger for them to press when it goes into that holding midfield player. So you're going to have to be really aware of pressure coming from this side of you. And if you're not sure and you can't get that look in, then you've always got that bounce pass back to your centre back. But again, it's tailoring it to the individual and making sure it's the organisation and planning, again, is the key for me, making it as specific, as functional and as beneficial for the players as possible.
Do you see a difference then in working with, because when you get into first team Premier League, I suppose the range of cultures that you're now exposed to with players significantly changes with so many foreign players in the league. Was there certain players that wanted that deal? Did you see relationships between certain cultures, like the Spanish people wanted that, the French people? Was there anything there that you can shine a light on?
Yeah, I think there's, if players speak the same language, they're naturally drawn to each other. At both clubs I work for in the Premier League, English was obviously the spoken language in the dressing room, and pretty much all the players spoke reasonable English. There was one at West Brom who, when he first joined, his English wasn't fantastic, but we had Spanish-speaking players in the squad, and I speak Spanish to a reasonable level, so could get a basic level of information across and do that. And at times, if there were players that I felt needed a little bit more attention in terms of taking the information, and I would do that. So if we had a team meeting that I was delivering and there was a specific part for a player and I wasn't sure he was going to grasp it completely in that meeting, I would take him in 15 minutes before the meeting, run through it with him, speak to him in his own language if necessary to make sure that he understood it, and then go back through it in the team meeting with everyone else. So I think from a coaching perspective, it's taking your ego out of it and going into the game. Does every player know what's expected of them? Are they prepared as much as they should be? How you get to that point is, everyone will do it differently. But I was always of the opinion, and I always will be, that if a player goes into the game and doesn't know what's expected, or not sure on what the game plan is, or what we're doing in or out of possession, then again, that's my problem. That's not his problem. So yeah, there was situations with different players and different nationalities and cultures, and you learn from that as a coach, and it challenges you and certainly makes you better.
All right, Jose Mourinho, he mentored you for your pro license. How was that their experience? How did that come about?
It was basically the secretary for my pro license. At the start, you had a task where you had to interview a head coach or a manager, and I didn't want to do it within Crystal Palace, within the club, because you're working there day in, day out. I'm seeing the manager, I know his strengths and what he's all about. I wanted to do something different and have a new perspective. And the secretary at Crystal Palace, Christine, she knew Jose's secretary or PA well. So just asked the question of whether I could go in and speak to him and interview him ahead of this task. And unfortunately, he agreed, and it was fantastic. It was a great experience, and I can't speak highly enough of him for what he did. It was also a motivation for me, because he'd come from a similar type of background in terms of not a playing career, and he'd educated himself and worked up working with young players and progressing up through the senior levels. I could relate to that, and I wanted to pick his brains on that and learn from those experiences as well. And he was so insightful for that period of time. Was really open, and took some huge lessons from him that have made a big difference to me, and I still use now effectively, particularly around the human part of the game. I took as much in terms of dealing with people and how you manage the group than specific football aspects. He spoke really well around keeping everyone on board, how you manage the players out of the group, those things that I was talking about, and treating people as people, understanding their backgrounds, understanding their family situation. And he was really warm and really enlightening in that respect. So for me, it was an honour to be able to speak to him and go through it. And as I say, he was really open. Then invited me out to watch training, and again was very open with what they were doing, and a touch of class, really, a real touch of class from him.
How were the sessions?
He didn't take much to train on that. It was a Sunday after a Saturday game. They had a cup game on the Tuesday, so it was a split session with a recovery group and a working group that were working with Steve Holland, and he just sort of oversaw both the groups and managed the session effectively. But I'd read before that when people come to visit him, he likes to have something for himself to try and learn from. So I took in a book, and it was difficult trying to think of something that you think that this man would want and be able to learn from. So I took him a coaching book from a different sport. And my wife's actually Portuguese, and she'd recommended taking some pastel de natas, which are Portuguese sort of custard tarts, and I think he was more enthusiastic about them than my book, to be honest.
Brilliant. Listened to an interview recently with Steve Sidwell, who I actually thought was going to say Mourinho when they asked him who the best manager he worked with, and he said Stevie Coppell. Again, similar to Terry Venables, maybe it's because of the media, social media today, and he doesn't really get the credit he deserves in the coaching community either. Can you tell us a little bit about what Steve Coppell was like to work for?
I think with Steve, I understand where you're coming from that, because he's probably not got as renowned a reputation as he should have for what he's done in the game. And I think that's probably due to his character and his personality. And in Steve's own words, he doesn't necessarily play the game. But I think anyone that's played with him, worked with him, competed against him, will have the utmost respect for him. And everyone I know that has worked with him or played for him, such as Steve, who I know played for him at several clubs, has got nothing but good things to say about him. And I'm no different. He when I was a young player, he was manager at Crystal Palace, so he was someone that I'd always looked up to and had an enormous amount of respect for. So when he phoned me out of the blue with the opportunity to go out and work in India, I jumped at the chance. to go and experience a new league and a new culture, a new country, but also to work with him. He's a very astute guy, very deep thinker. The big takeaway I took from Steve is that he always sees the big picture, and he fills the details in around it, but he doesn't get taken away from that big picture. And then he delegates very well around that. So for me, he gave me a lot of responsibility in terms of coaching and meetings and putting videos on for the players and going through reviews and everything like that. Always involved you in the process in terms of the team and what he was thinking with selection, etc. And that was great. I really enjoyed that this is the picture, this is what I want, but go and fill in the detail. Go and do it, coach how you want in your way. He would feedback on that. He would be positive about what you'd done. So for me, it was fantastic to work for him and also to learn from him. Just being in the hotel, and obviously we were in the same hotel, we're living there, having 3 meals a day together, and hearing his stories and picking his brains about games that I remember at Crystal Palace as a young lad and players that he'd had and different challenges that he'd had, and even going back to his playing days at Manchester United and England. For me, it was an absolute pleasure to work with him professionally, but also to get to know him personally. And I think he's someone that should still be contributing a lot more to our game in this country. I think a lot of clubs have missed out on not involving him in some capacity because he's still got so much to offer. Yeah,
you always hear really good things about him. I was actually at that cup final, 1990, the Palace.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was 10 years old, but that was the first time that I thought he had this big aggressive team, right and bright, and then there was Andy Gray, Salako. It was a great Palace team.
Yeah.
But he was so mild, he was so, wasn't he, almost like a thinker? And I'd never seen that before in terms of a manager. They were usually shouters and screamers, Fergie hairdryer, but
yeah,
Papa was a bit different.
You're very, very laid back, very comfortable in his own skin, knows who he is as a person, and very comfortable and confident with that. And that was probably where one of the changes I had to make in India. The managers that I'd worked for up until that point had all been quite vocal, quite energetic on the sideline, and Steve wasn't. Steve was quite reserved. So, after a game or two out there, I thought I need to be the one in the technical area here and getting some vocals going on and being in that technical area to show a presence to the players, because he liked to stand back, close to the dugout, a deep thinker about the game, and that's the way I'd been as an assistant. So I think as an assistant, you're trying to work off the manager's strengths and find ways to help the group, and that was a change for me, actually trying to give that energy to the players in terms of a presence in the dugout and give some information onto the pitch that I hadn't had to do previously because of the type of manager that I'd worked for.
Let's talk about working with West Brom Palace Premier League, and as another question that I'm really, really fascinated about, because in the coaching community and coaching courses, we prepare for games. Game preparation is basically, it's against a team that's relatively the same ability as you. There's a psychology, surely, of preparing against the big teams, the Uniteds, the Cities, the Arsenals of the world. And I wanted to get your insight on how do you get the balance right between, placing the emphasis on stopping one team and then obviously always trying to win the game at the same time?
It was certainly always a challenge. In terms of the preparation, I didn't do anything different regardless of the opposition. My working week would generally stay the same. I'd watch the same amount of games, put in the same level of preparation, put together the meetings in the same format, prepare sessions in as much detail as possible. And the reason for that was probably more for me and to do with the other teams in the league, because I think human nature sways you towards preparing perhaps in greater detail for the bigger games or the so-called big teams, and then maybe not doing as much for the teams that are in and around you, or even lower league teams in cup competitions. So by having a process that I worked to, and an analysis structure that we used certainly at West Brom, it was always done in the same way with the same level of detail. And I think that was a good thing to do, because it takes any tendency to do more or less out of the equation. You're always, fully prepared for the games. And in terms of the players' mentality, you knew in those big games that they were going to be motivated. You knew they were going to be focused. You knew they were going to be driven to try and cause an upset. So it was a case of delivering tactical information and keeping them calm, probably. With those top teams, I would limit the amount of positive footage that I showed, because you don't want to show brilliance after brilliance, goal after goal, and you're knocking the confidence of the players and perhaps putting fear into them. So I would focus on showing what they did, being detailed in how they play and how they build up and exactly what they're going to do in the game, but then being really strong with the messages on, this is what it means for us. This is what we are going to have to do to take a point or to win this game. And I think it's then a case of, I've always had the belief, I always will do, that every game is winnable. It's finding a way. It's then getting that message across to the players and giving them the confidence to go and deliver it. And that was the same with the top teams. I never went into any of those games fearful or thinking we've got no chance of winning this game. It was, right, we need to be at our absolute best. We need to get it spot on. We probably need them to have a little bit of an off day or not be at their very best. But you think we've got a chance of winning this game. And actually, during my time with Palace and at West Brom, managed to beat all of those top six teams at one point or another, with Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, which is, a great achievement in terms of the size of the clubs that I was working at. And there was some really great groups of players that produced some terrific performances to get those results. But the big thing is not putting that fear into the players, I think. And if we were playing a lower league team, or a team perhaps below us in the league, I would sometimes go the other way and make them look possibly better than the players thought they were, or put more to try and liven them up. And look, this is not an easy game. This is going to be a challenge. These are the reasons why. And you then, because the danger of those games is maybe they haven't got the same level of motivation and focus as they are when they're playing at Old Trafford or the Etihad or wherever it is.
Yeah, let's talk about then life on the bench in the Premier League, because again, your insight to see, does your process depend on the manager that you're working for? Does it depend on the type of game? Does it depend on where the players are? And how do you all navigate that assistant role on the bench at a big stadium?
Yeah, you're very much working to the strengths of the manager, his preferences, what he likes. I think once the game starts, you're limited in terms of your input into it, to be honest, which is why my focus was always on the preparation going in. The earlier part of the week was really top heavy for me, to make sure that I ticked every box. I'd done everything I could. The players had the information they needed, etc. So that going into the game, I wanted to be calm. I wanted to be able to see it clearly. In terms of my processes, I always went through on the morning of a game what substitutions we would have to make if we had an injury in each position. So we'd go through each position in the team. If we get an injury there, what change we're going to have to make, and have some thoughts in my head. Similarly, if we go behind, what could we do to change the game, to chase the game? If we go ahead, what changes can we make in terms of shape and personnel to manage the game, to see the game out? Just so if anything does happen in a game, at least you're prepared and you're not just reacting on the spot, and the level of information you're going to give to help the manager is then more useful than just suddenly reacting and thinking about it off the top of your head. In terms of giving that information to the manager, that's an art in itself, because they can be caught up in the game, they can be emotional. So trying to find the right time to give them that information, one, so that it's beneficial, and two, so that it sinks in, is a challenge, is a skill in itself. So that, as an assistant, I think you've always got to, I always believe you say what you think is right, but then you support the manager's decision, whatever he decides to do. So if I suggested bringing player A on and he went, no, I want to bring on player B, then yeah, okay, player B, ready, set pieces, what you're doing, and get them ready for the game. But it's, I said, the big thing for me was being prepared so that during the game, I was prepared. Going into the game, I was conscience free. And as the game is going on, I've done as much as I can in terms of being ready for any eventualities. And even in terms of the opposition, what changes do they usually make? If they're behind with 20 minutes to go, what do they normally do? Who comes on? What shape do they go to? So that if suddenly they're making that change, I can relay that to the manager. Look, this usually means they're now going 2 up front and they're going to go wide and get crosses in or whatever it may be. But just as much preparation. Sometimes the game's unpredictable and it could be something that the manager has never done before, but at least you've given yourself as much chance as possible of having an effect.
You see some footage in games today with staff members with the headphones in. Did you have any connection or relationship with people upstairs watching the game, analysis, anything like that in any of the clubs?
I did at Crystal Palace for a bit. I didn't particularly enjoy it personally because I just want to watch the game and focus on that. And sometimes the analyst would, we might have a goal disallowed for offside, and he'd go, "That was onside. I've seen the replay. It was onside." So then you're tempted to go and rip the full official's head off. So, sometimes it's not necessarily a good thing. So I didn't do that at West Brom. Someone else was linked up to Jerry Francis up in the stand. So. I see the benefits of it in some respects, but for me, I want to, you obviously get that great picture from upstairs, but you don't get the attachment with the game that you get from being on the bench. So I want both. I want to see the game. I want to be there and almost feel what the players are going through and experience the game with them, because that gave me the best possible situation in terms of helping them, I felt, with a comment or whatever it may be at half time.
What about halftime then? Like the different managers you worked with, did they all have different processes at halftime, or what went on there?
All very different, to be honest. Some would sort of take time beforehand, before speaking, would go into a room as a staff or to one side and discuss and then decide what points to deliver. Others would go straight in and just deliver the points that they were going to deliver, maybe have a break to go through set pieces or some individual points. Some would like assistance to contribute or to put things across. Others wouldn't. Others would prefer to do sort of the main team talk themselves, and then as coaches and assistants, you're then picking off perhaps individual players. All different. Some would rather use a tactics board. Some had a flip chart and wanted to put things on there. And they all had different strengths. Some were very good in terms of the visual side and showing things, whereas others could paint a great picture with their voice and the passion, the enthusiasm in what they did. You got the emotion into the players as much as anything. So fortunate to work with some really experienced managers, and all very different with their own strengths and their own styles. So for me, it was a terrific education, because I know what I would do, but you're also looking and thinking, okay, yeah, that worked then. I wouldn't necessarily have done it that way, but that's had an impact. And you never know until the second half whether it has had an impact, or, so it's always hindsight in terms of the end of the game, or certainly the start of the second half. But yeah, all different, but all strong in their own way.
Have you seen a change in post game then, with the commercial side of it and the science side of it? What happens now after games? I've always been fascinated with that in the Premier League.
I think the recovery is instant now. You're straight on to recovering for the next game, especially if you've got a midweek fixture. It's imperative that you're recovering as quickly as possible. The majority of the managers I work for wouldn't say too much after games, which is probably surprising with probably people's perceptions of one or two of them that think they would be, sort of aggressive after a game, and they weren't. And it was almost, no, listen, when I would speak about it on Monday, or whatever day we're next in, we'll reflect on it and then we'll go through things then. The only occasion really I've seen managers lose their temper has been for the right reasons, where the effort hasn't been there, or the concentration levels have been poor in a game. But if you've lost the game where actually the players are giving everything, and just come out the wrong side of the result, then there doesn't tend to be too much finger pointing or blaming then. But it's definitely changing now. You've got the video clips that are ready immediately after a game. Sports science keeps changing, and then in terms of recovery protocols, and I think players are taking a lot more ownership of that themselves. I think that the players I worked for at Palace and at West Brom were all very good professionals and looked after themselves in terms of, especially in terms of recovery. Instantly eating the right things, drinking the right things, recovery socks, whatever it may be, to give them the best possible chance of recovering and playing well in the next game.
Tony Pulis and set pieces, obviously, legendary in the detail that he's done. We don't know anything about how that's done in a week and what goes through that there. Can you shine a little light on the detail and the work that goes into that?
We work very hard on set pieces, both at Crystal Palace and at West Brom, because it's a big part of the team in the Premier League, because of the finances and the money that other teams have got. You've got to find another way of winning games and achieving results. And set pieces was something that we always felt we could have good control over. We could be really detailed around. When I joined West Brom, I actually introduced an analysis document before the game, purely on set pieces and restarts. And we had a set piece meeting, purely on set pieces, a separate set piece meeting before each game, because I knew how important it was to Tony, and I knew what great opportunities they were going to be for us to score or to create. And in terms of the week, we would do a lot of work in terms of the preparation. So watching the opposition, putting the document together, preparing the meeting around it. Sometimes we would pull individual players in advance and show them certain things. And the big thing really, and he probably doesn't get the credit for it, was that Tony coaches set pieces in detail. It's not, all right, we're running through set pieces on a Friday for 10 minutes and then we do it tomorrow. We would sometimes do it opposed, sometimes do it unopposed, sometimes do it on a Thursday, repeat it again on a Friday. But it would always be detailed and coached in terms of how to mark. When are we dropping as a zonal line? Who's filling what spaces? Where's the delivery going on our attacking ones? What's the signal? What are the movements? Is there a block? Is there someone running across a shoulder? Whatever it may be, he coached it in detail, and there was high standards around it. So I don't think there's no rocket science. It wasn't the way it was structured necessarily. It was just, we prepared well, we were very detailed, and he always coached in very good detail around his set pieces, because it was a big part of what he felt was important in a game.
So even though it was unopposed, it was still pretty much in the intensity and the quality was there?
Yeah, sometimes we would actually, I remember there were occasions at Palace and at West Brom, we would do them unopposed at the start of the session, and they'd be a lower intensity and just getting the timing of the movements. And then at the end of the session, we would then do it opposed against the under-23s, because the under-23s are now going to do it properly and mark properly and get in the way of things. And that's when you would then get the timing and the intensity of it. So there were different ways of doing it. Sometimes we would, show a meeting before training on the Friday, just to say, look, this is what we're doing in terms of set pieces. If it's tearing it down with rain, we're actually showing them inside first, so that we don't have to spend too long on the grass with them standing there getting soaking wet. You've gone through it. It's just now, right, let's have a few run throughs, make sure we've got it, and just being a bit sensible with things. And we'd also individualise things on the day of the game. So we would show individual clips. If our centre-back was marking their centre-back, he would get to see that centre-back's runs through corners and what he does, so that individually he knew what to expect, what type of runs he makes, where he makes them, so that he was as aware as possible of what was going to happen in the game.
Coaching in India, how was that experience?
Brilliant. Absolutely loved it. It was... Yeah, the league itself was a lot slower than what I was used to in terms of tempo and pace. It was physically less aggressive, but technically and tactically, it was a really challenging league. But probably the biggest experience for me was just, off the pitch as well, the different cultures, the different personalities of the players. We had different religions within the group, and understanding that from a human point of view, and learning the different ways of life and the different cultures in India. And we had players from Brazil, from Nigeria, from Spain, different nationalities all there in India. So that was the best part of the experience for me, was seeing the country, seeing the cultures, and getting to meet a whole new range of people that did things in different ways than what we do here. And I enjoyed the football as well. As I say, it was physically, it took some getting used to, partly because of the heat and humidity as well. But it was challenging in other ways, where teams would play shapes that you wouldn't face here in England, and wide players would let your fullback go. And now, right, okay, that's fine. We're going to get an overload, but we've got to make sure that we deal with that and we lock that in so we're secure on the turnover. So little challenges like that. But for me, it was a great experience. And as I said earlier, the opportunity to work with Steve was a big attraction in it as well. But it was a really positive experience and a great learning curve for me.
You're very much a student of the game, and you dedicate a lot of time, it seems, to learning and improving just by the way you talk about it, and every stop, every journey. What teams are you enjoying at the minute? I see the work that you do with Football DNA, and you're analysing quite a few games. Is there a team that you're really enjoying watching at the minute?
I watch a lot of games. I'm not a big fan of TV footage. It annoys me because I want to see the whole pitch and I want to see the whole shape of the team. So I much prefer watching games live or from a tactical camera where I can see the movement of all the players at the same time. So I watch at least 2 games a week live here in England, where I will get to the games, and I watch more on tactical cameras and be able to see that footage. Sometimes I'm watching a game more for personnel reasons, where I'm looking at, I might be a Premier League 2 game, watching under 23 game, and you're just looking for any talented young players, or a lower league game where you're looking if there's any players in there that could potentially step up in the league, and just build my database of players that I keep. So, in the next role or in a future role, it's there for you to look back and say, oh yeah, I remember that kid, or I remember that player, or he could be a good signing for us. And then other games you're watching purely from a tactical point of view and to learn. And I tend to watch games in context of what I want to take from it. So if you want to watch a team counter pressing and being really quick on transitions, then I'm watching Jurgen Klopp teams. I always really enjoy watching his Dortmund teams, and obviously he's done a fantastic job at Liverpool now. So I would watch those games with specific things in mind that I wanted to learn from. And I love watching Man City play. I've always loved watching Pep Guardiola teams. His Barcelona team is without doubt the best team I've seen in my lifetime, and what he's then gone and done in Bayern Munich, and now come into the Premier League, and the way he's achieved what he's done with Manchester City, I think is outstanding. And I love watching them play, as I do a number of teams. Leeds in the Championship here have been great as well since Marcelo Bielsa has come in. The transformation in, because there wasn't a big turnaround in personnel. It was just a change of style, of beliefs, of playing principles, and watching them play, whether they win or not. I just think they're absolutely brilliant to watch. But I'm open-minded with games. I watch games across Europe, and in the position I'm in at the moment, it's a little bit selfish where I'm watching games to take things that I want, or challenge my own beliefs and my own principles, or I might have an area of the game that I think, right, how would I do that against that shape? So I watch a couple of teams doing it to see what they're doing and learn from that, and then decide whether that's how I would do it or whether I would do it differently. But I love the game. I love watching games, and it's just a case of keep learning and keep improving all the time.
It's a great time in England, isn't it, with Klopp and Pep and Bielsa? We're having access to them every week. I mean, what impact do you think they've had on the coaching community over there?
I think with some of the top foreign coaches that we've had come into this country, we've been really, really fortunate. Even going back to Arsene Wenger, the impact he had on the game in this country, Jose Mourinho, and even the likes of Rafa Benitez, Maurizio Pochettino, as well as the ones that you've mentioned, have all had a huge impact on coaching in this country. I think we're probably now seeing some British coaches come through that have taken things on from that and have learned from that. I think we've been slow to do that. I think we need to give more opportunities to British coaches in this country, whether that be from lower leagues, whether that be from academies. With, there's no reason why an under-23 coach can't step up and take a first team here with what they've learned about the game now and the process that they've been on. We've probably been a little bit guilty in terms of clubs of actually taking coaches that aren't better than what we've got. And that's the issue. The top ones and the ones that, are adding to the game, brilliant, fantastic. But I think we've also taken a number of coaches in this country that, I'm watching them play, I'm watching their teams, and I can't see an identity. You can't see what they're doing. And that's the issue for me is, why can a British coach or an English coach be doing that job? There are people that have proven they can do it at that level, and they're not getting the opportunity. So I think we've been very fortunate. We've been very lucky. From a selfish point of view, in terms of English coaching, British coaching, we now need to make the most of that and bring our own coaches through. And it certainly had an impact player-wise. We're producing really, really top young players now. I think we can do the same with coaches as well.
Last one for you. It's another hot topic almost in coaching community, especially over here, is this idea of that mentor and getting that mentor. And it's not what you know, who you know, but it's also about relationships. It's also about getting yourself out there and meeting people and learning, and which is what you've done. I mean, what advice would you have for a young coach who's 23, 24, 25, who doesn't have that network? How do they get out there and meet the people that they need to meet?
I think it's a process over time. I don't think it's something that can be faked or forced. You can put yourself in great positions by going on coaching courses, educating yourself, going to events. There's so much online now that you can take from. But the biggest thing I would say is, learn yourself. I think you have to start as a coach with some identity, some beliefs and values that are important to you. That's a reason that anyone starts coaching. And then you develop around those beliefs and values. You add your experience. When I started coaching early 20s and going through, and I started at Palace at 24, 25 with the under 11s, I just wanted to coach as much as possible. And as I said, Palace was great at that time because I wasn't given a curriculum and said, coach that. It was, there's your team, go and get on with it. And I could do sessions that I wanted, do things that I believed in, develop the type of players that I felt we could produce in this country. But it was the experience of doing it was the most important thing. And then over time, you get to meet people and you get the opportunity to learn from others. And throughout my career, I've been lucky to have some really good mentors and people that have taken the time with me. And even when I was in the academy, the likes of Mick Jones and Lenny Lawrence, who were two of the assistant managers at the clubs, vastly experienced, thousands of games in football, and they would pass on knowledge and assist and help. And then the managers that I've worked for, been able to learn from them and pick up on their strengths and what they do. But you've got to put yourself out as well. I've travelled a lot to visit clubs, and sometimes covered, sometimes you're paying for it yourself. So I think you've got to have that motivation to do it. You've got to put yourself out. I've gone and watched some top coaches in working and gone to watch games all across Europe because I wanted to get better and I wanted to learn. And it's difficult because sometimes you are paying for it yourself, and it's, it is coming out of your own pocket. But if you want to get better, and if that's what you want to do is coaching, then the dedication and the sacrifice is the most important thing.
Brilliant. What a way to finish it. Ben, thank you so much.
No, pleasure. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks so much to Ben for his time and his insight there. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Yeah, I said at the start, 45 minutes wouldn't do it justice. I could have sat there for another 2 or 3 hours listening to his perspectives and the insights to how they worked. I seem to say this every week, but in social media we think that coaching is a lot more simple than what it really is. And I think that we tend to overlook the fact that those environments are very, very complex in terms of not only the people, but in terms of the pressure that is on there. And then also in the match schedule, the climate, the finances, all these things play a massive part in how teams have to be coached and players have to be worked alongside. And it's definitely not as easy as what we think it is. So I really enjoyed that. The biggest takeaway for me, and obviously being an assistant coach myself, I really wanted to ask him different questions about life on the bench and how those set pieces and whereabouts he felt that he could make a difference. Two things for me that stood out were, number one, the processes that Ben seems to put in place wherever he goes and how he remains true to those processes, no matter if they're playing, like you said, one of the top teams or even a non-league team in the cup. Getting those processes consistent will buy the trust from the players. I think that's so crucial. And then second of all was how to get those processes as efficient as possible. And again, we think that we can spend 2 or 3 days analysing a game or work with a player to get them better in 6 to 10 months. But reality is, as Ben said, the requirements at that level are you have to be a lot quicker at your job, whether it's sports science or whether it's the pressure. So in getting your team better and getting yourself better, the urgency to do that, I think, is pretty inspiring. And you can see that Ben doesn't waste a lot of his time in how he describes his structures, and it also seems to be that's how he views his own education as well. Thought that was great at the end where he's saying if it takes you to pay for a flight, pay for the flight, just go and get yourself better. And sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes we talk ourselves out of more opportunities than are really there for us. So I thought that was great. I would love to hear your insight on it, as always, at Gary Curneen on Instagram, at Gary Curneen on Twitter. What you enjoyed about it, what resonated with you, any takeaways, please let me know. And before you shoot off, please do a little 5-star rating just in the podcast. Helps with everything. Really appreciate you listening. Have a good week. Enjoy.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. For more coaching topics, sessions, and resources, head on over to Coach Curneen on Facebook or visit the website at www.modernsoccercoach.com.